Good evening, and thank you so much for joining Country Bookshelf and Sins Invalid for an exploration of the intersectional justice and art activism in Crip Kinship with writer Shayda Kafai and Dr. Paulina Abustan. I'm your host, Emmy, here at Country Bookshelf on the ancestral, unceded land of the Absaloki, Crow, Kootenai, Bitterroot Salish, Cheyenne, Shoshone Bannock, Ocheti Shakowin, Kalispel, Pend Oreille, South Piikani Blackfeet, Northern Cheyenne, Chippewa Cree, Assiniboine, Aani, Gros Ventre, and Dakota peoples, among others. We encourage those of you joining us from outside Bozeman and Montana to learn about the land you occupy and the stories of its peoples. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter and follow us on Eventbrite and social media to stay up to date on all the happenings at Country Bookshelf. Before we begin the discussion tonight, I want to point out a few things about our virtual space. If you didn't add a copy of Crip Kinship to your registration, we encourage you to visit countrybookshelf.com and purchase today. A link will be appearing in the chat periodically for your convenience. We are live streaming and recording this event on the Country Bookshelf YouTube channel. If you need to leave early or arrive late, you can catch up there. If you have any questions for our authors, submit them at any time by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or drop them in the chat and we'll get to them as time allows. If you run into any tech issues along the way, we recommend you first try exiting and re-entering the webinar. If you aren't able to re-enter the webinar, you can view the live stream of the event on YouTube. We'd like to remind everyone that this is a shared creative space and we want to remain safe for all who have joined us today. Offensive or inappropriate comments or questions will see the user dismissed from this space. We are very grateful to the language justice team at Sins Invalid for their work in providing ASL and CART services for this event. Now for the good part, Shayda Kafai, she, her, is an assistant professor of gender and sexuality studies in the Ethnic and Women's Studies Department at California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. As a queer, disabled, mad femme of color, she commits to practicing the many ways we can reclaim our body minds from systems of oppression. To support this work as an educator scholar, Shayda applies disability justice and collective care practices in the spaces she cultivates. Shayda's writing and speaking presentations focus on intersectional body politics, particularly on how bodies are constructed and how they hold the capacity for rebellion. Dr. Paulina Abustan, any pronoun, gender fluid, centers the alternative world making of queer, critical race, feminist, disability justice activists found within youth learning, youth popular culture, animated storytelling, and Filipinx and BIPOC coalitional activist spaces. Dr. Abustan is a 9th year higher education instructor and a visiting assistant professor of Western Washington University's Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies, and a part-time faculty of University of Washington's Education and Disability Studies and Highline College's Ethnic and Gender Studies. Dr. Abustan co-founded a trans and queer of color-led organization and youth tutoring program in Eastern Washington and co-led numerous social justice movements in Southern California. All right, I will hand over this lovely virtual space to our hosts. Just very excited to have them here with us.
Thanks so much for the introduction and to Country Bookshelf. Thank you all so much for hosting us. Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? Okay. A little anxious, but got my toys.
Same. We are ready. And we invite all of y'all too that are watching, like grab your care items. join us however you need to join us, with your beverages and your snacks. And should we start with an image description and land acknowledgement of just like where we're located? All right, y'all, I'll go first. My name is Shayda. I am a Middle Eastern femme with olive skin and short, like pixie cut hair. I'm wearing big hoop earrings with green stones hanging in the center. I have a V-neck long sleeve black shirt. I am sitting in a very messy office. We just moved, and so there's like a big oak armoire behind me. My aunt's treadmill is back there. I have boxes, and then I have some plant children that I've just moved in. And I am coming to you all from the unceded territories of the Keech Gabrielino people, also known as Pomona, in the state of California.
Thank you, Shayda. I go by Paul, Paulina, or Lena, gender fluid, any pronoun. I got short black hair and blue glasses and brown like the color of the ocean, a green hoodie sweatshirt with a galaxy behind me, which reminds me of your book that I love. As you mentioned, the constellation of our crip-centric zones and joy. So I'm so excited to chat with you today. I am honored.
Thank
Maraming
you so much.
salamat. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to start like moving my body in excitement. I'm so happy that we're here and we're sharing digital space and that we're going to like talk about this. Where shall we begin?
Awesome. So I have the first question for us. We have a few questions we're having in conversation with each other. So the first one is, so for me, as a queer, gender fluid, neurodivergent, chronically ill, and disabled Filipinx scholar, activist, and educator, Shayda, thank you so much. I found your writing to be an ode to Sins Invalid and to trans, queer, Crip of color-led disability justice activisms. You are healing, you are affirming, and you wrote a love letter, I felt like, to me and to all of us. And so I'm excited to learn more. May you share more about what led you to become who you are today, what led you to Crip Kinship, writing this love letter to so many of us, and who are the queer, femme, Crip of color ancestors you continue to center and honor?
I love this question, these questions. You know, I came to writing and thinking about this after learning about Sins Invalid and disability justice in like 2009, 2010. And I'm just so amazed and grateful for like my undergraduate students now who are very familiar with disability justice. Yeah. And just, you know, yeah, so I came to this very, very late in my trajectory and understanding my own disability and my own madness. And the project started out first as a dissertation. And so it was time to like pick our topics. And I knew that I wanted to center the communities that have most thrived, helped me like thrive and be resilient and just very grounded in my sense of self. And a friend helped me find Sins Invalid because I was looking for a community that was very intersectional and intentional about being disabled and queer and trans and gender nonconforming and of color, right? Like that specific combination. And so as a very anxious person, I decided to take a leap and like email Patty Byrne, like the amazing Patty Byrne and Leroy F. Moore Jr. And it resulted in a project that looks radically different than what is here now. And I graduated in 2014 and I returned to the work in 2016 because I was reading a lot of stories about the persistence of eugenics in our communities. I was experiencing a lot of Crip loss, and I had such a profound need to be reminded of not just what our communities do, but the ways in which we sustain one another. And so I started reworking this project in 2016 because I needed evidence that disabled queer folks of color had powerful magic to share. And we have powerful stories. And so this was totally written in Crypt time. I want to be like super transparent about that, like Crypt time, Matt time. So 2016 to 2020 was the amount of like writing time, love time. And the other question was like, who are the queer disabled of color, like ancestors that really like sustain us, right? I remember, so I think back to like the really foundational folks and I'm looking at them now. So to the left of my computer, my left is my writing altar. And I have amazing folks on it like Audre Lorde and Gloria Anzaldúa, and Trisha Hersey, who's the creator of NAP Ministry. And I'll share the link of their Instagram on the chat for everybody. You know, now Ancestor Stacey Milburn and Ancestor Bell Hooks. And these were amazing folks that inform how I write and why I write. And I think too about the amazing disabled, chronically ill, queer and trans femmes of color in my life that have taught me so much about care and tenderness. Lilac Violet Maldonado, who's cited in the book, Vanessa Durand, like all the amazing femmes who like taught me such an important practice of like care and what that looks like and what that can look like in digital space. I mean, I'm thinking about Leah Lakshmi Piepshna Samarasingha's book, Care Work. I'm thinking about this like profoundly amazing quote that I read from Aurora Levins Morales when I picked this project back up, talking about like, of course, like my anxiety brain just like disappeared the quote that I'm trying to think of, but it paraphrased to be like, there is no neutral body from which all other bodies deviate. Like these are the voices and these are the folks that resonate and that have guided me in my work and in the writing of this project. Can I ask you the similar question of just like who are the amazing disabled, chronically ill, mad, queer folks of color, trans folks of color that sustain you and your practice? Yeah, and your work.
Thank you, Shayda, for this invitation and this conversation. Your entire book was an invitation. So thank you for this Crypt community. In terms of who my ancestors are, I found them at UC Santa Barbara Feminist Studies, learning about chronically ill, queer, Chicana lesbian, Gloria Anzaldúa, and how she navigated her life, right? Just always feeling divided, always feeling pieced up, not welcome, even within her own homes where you think you would have home. So I found myself through her, through Audre Lorde, right? As like you, and disability justice and Sins Invalid, who center intersectionality. There is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives. So I began to really see my multiple selves as whole and our movements as whole at UC Santa Barbara. So thank you to my amazing women of color professors there, Dr. Mariel Miller-Young and more. And it was really through student activism. I organized and co-organized student of color, women of color, queer of color conferences, queer Filipinx conferences, and worked collaboratively with janitors on campus, grounds workers. My dad growing up was a janitor, so I really vibed with the Workers Coalition at UC Santa Barbara. And that's where I really began to find my, what Dr. Melinda de Jesus calls, right, feminists, because the F doesn't exist in the Tagalog language. So we are feminists, feminists at UC Santa Barbara. And I found my trans queer of color fam, my immigrant fam, and those who care about social, economic, environmental justice. And I share this with my students all the time that I didn't hear the word queer. I didn't hear LGBTQIA. I heard none of that during high school, right? As many of us. And I didn't see rainbow flags until UC Santa Barbara. So that's where I began to really feel home also about my Filipinx self. And I'm like you, and it wasn't until grad school that I learned about critical disability studies. Shout out to my mentor, Dr. Jen Barclay, and also my dissertation committee member, Dr. Nirmala Aravels. I love them so much. They taught me about disability studies, critical disability studies, disability justice. And so my communities are you all. Shayda, also some awesome queer Crip of color scholars such as Gina Kim, Sammy Shock, all of the folks you mentioned, and Lydia XZ Brown. And I want to show love to my Nero Crip of color writing community and academics community, Dr. Holly Pearson, Dr. Sara Acevedo, and Haley Yoshizaki Gibbons. So much love that we are creating for ourselves and each other. And it is really my trans, queer, femme, Filipinx ancestors as well who resisted colonization, who resist imperialism, wars, neoliberalism. We know this too well. Filipinx people have survived so much. And, even within my family, there's so many disabilities, mental health, and more. And for the longest time, Shayda, I felt I was broken, as you have discussed in your many talks. And I blamed it on myself, and I blamed it on my family for the anti-Asian racism that we experienced, for me growing up whitening my skin because I thought my brown skin wasn't beautiful. I blamed myself for clothespinning my nose to not have Filipino features. So for the longest time, I didn't love my body. I didn't love myself. I was ashamed of my family. I wanted to not, think queer, act queer, be queer. I tried to get rid of that, but it wasn't until UC Santa Barbara, Gloria Anzaldúa, Audre Lorde, rainbows everywhere, just all the love. And then coming to disability studies and learning that I am not broken, systems are broken. Really, that is what began my shift. Like I found y'all. And even at the end of your book, you share, I'm waiting for your book. Let's find each other. Same with Leah Lakshmi Pyepsna Singha, right? So thank you so much, as you, disability justice and more, right? You are showing us a world where we can be ancestors for the future, that hopefully we have worlds of rest, care, and joy. So maraming salamat. And I got more questions for you if you don't mind.
I love it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was like looking down, my cat just like knocked over my entire cup of coffee all over my desk right now. It's really exciting over here. I just wanted to say, like, I'm really So many of the experiences that you shared, I also shared as a person of color and as a queer person and as a disabled person who was very much unaware of what it meant to politicize disability, number one, and number two, even claim it as an identity. Like that was so far removed from any experience that I had or that I was taught until the end of like undergrad, and just having really amazing so Stacey Milburn, in this really phenomenal interview that she did with it was on Alice Wong's Disability Visibility podcast with Leah. And, you know, they were talking about all the amazing like Crip folks that enter into our lives, that kind of doula us through these really transformational moments of arriving at our disabilities, or unlearning, you know, internalized ableism, saneism, fill in the blank. And yeah, it took me a very long time to get there. And I so appreciate you sharing that story too, because it's such a powerful reminder that we are all, we are seeking that community. And then when we arrive there, we provide that very loving doulaship to one another. So all the folks you mentioned, and when we were originally sharing our list with one another, I was reading your list and I was like, yes, all these people, you know, and I forgot to mention femme supremacy. I don't know if my keyboard works anymore because of the coffee, but if you all go on Instagram and look for femme supremacy, this amazing cultural wisdom, knowledge, art producer who reminds us just what femme work means. So yeah, I'm glad that we speak about the struggle, but also the constant process of unlearning that non-disabled supremacy demands of us. The constant unlearning that white supremacy and cis heteropatriarchy demand of us. Yeah, thank you for starting us off there.
So we got some more questions for you and us.
Okay, good. I'm glad it's the us, because yeah, I love learning about and hearing your wisdom.
Thank you. So the next question is about crip-centric storytelling zones inside and out of the classroom. So I could share, so many people love all of your work, all of the chapters. And these chapters really were significant to me. I have never even heard those words all together, and storytelling.
Right?
And you laying out the history of Sins Invalid and everything, so beautiful. So what are they, and how do they take place inside and outside of your classroom?
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, like, I also did not know what a crip-centric liberated zone was. I just know I was interviewing Patty on Zoom, and Patty mentioned that phrase, and I was like, that place sounds juicy and amazing and lovely, and I'd love to go there. What is it? And so Patty shared with me that a crip-centric liberated zone is a very fluid space. So it can be created online, it can be temporary. In many ways, because of non-disabled supremacy, they're temporary spaces that we create. And it's a place where we go to remember our worth. It's a self-created place. It's a place created out of a very intentional love, self and communal love practice. And it's a place where we go to realize ourselves outside of the oppressive networks that regulate our lives on a daily basis. And, you know, it's this very radical idea to think about going somewhere and having your needs met, your access needs met, and to have your access needs met outside of like this oppressive like rhetoric of shame. And the first time I experienced that was through Sins Invalid's work, was when I went to one of their performances. And there was just abundant access, and the act of like being surrounded by disabled, chronically ill, queer, trans of color kin, and having needs met in such a way where you don't have to justify the need, which I think is so profoundly radical, but such a simple necessity, was really overwhelming and exciting. And so my goal and challenge was like, okay, so I'm a forever nerd. Yeah, I'm a forever nerd. I love reading books. I loved school so much that I stayed in school, and I teach at a university. I love teaching, and I'm abundantly nourished by my amazing students. And at the same time, I am so aware of the toxicity of the university and of academia. And, this really oppressive mandate that we kind of enter into the classroom and we leave our lives, our struggles, our body mind needs outside the classroom, right? Like I never experienced until I started working with one of my mentors, like people talking about their feelings before class started, or the struggles they're experiencing in their daily lives before class started. Like that was just unheard of. And so I found it to be this like really important practice to bring Sins Invalids that they really like, manifested in community disability justice practices of sustainability and collective access into the classroom. And let me see if I can put a link. I'll just make a note here and I'll put the link in the chat so everybody can access it. This is a link to the principles of disability justice, like brief definitions. Yeah, and I'll share a link to how to get the disability justice primer with y'all afterwards. But yeah, like what would it look like to create a classroom setting where I could share my access needs as a disabled MAD person, and where students could feel empowered to share their access needs without shame and without knowing that their integrity is not shifted by communicating what their needs are. And so, yeah, that enters the class with like check-ins, lots and lots of check-ins that folks aren't always sure what to do with, but like they'll get used to it. If capacity is low, classes will be shorter. I will talk slower. If things are due at too quick of a pace through a check-in, it'll be communicated, and like assignments can be due later. Like just reminding folks that number one, their body mind needs matter. You can learn in sustainability. You can learn in a disability justice centric space. And yeah, like our body mind needs are flexible. You mentioned Gloria Anzaldúa, and I love her writing and how she's like, yeah, I intended to write today, but I woke up and my diabetes was flaring and I couldn't. And so I had to allow myself to realize that I couldn't. And so all of that, I think, has valuable place in the classroom.
Thank you. I am in a lifelong process like you too, learning crip-centric liberated zones, practicing them in my teaching. And I will always be learning, because I'm always learning from my students who are disabled, who are neurodivergent, who are sick. So I know for me, right, growing up with anxiety, depression, ADHD, PTSD, OCD, long list, chronic body mind pain, my autoimmune illness. School wasn't always easy for me. I was anxious, I was depressed, and often I was that student that would reread something. Like, I love reading my books, I sure do, but I also forget what they were about. So it's a lifelong process of just learning, strategies, like highlighting things, putting in my own notes so I remember my own engagement. But I know what it's like to read a syllabus like 10 times and freak out and still not understand the assignment. So when my students are sharing their anxieties with me, I welcome it. I embrace it. Like, it makes sense that we're anxious. We're under a neoliberal system that is always forcing us to work and be perfect, and none of us are that. We want rest, as you and so many disability justice scholars and activists center. We need joy. So
Mhm.
in my classroom, we learn different languages together when we check in. And I ask folks, my students, calling in questions,
Oh,
such
yes.
as, have you had your coffee today? Have you had your tea? In sign language or in other languages, learning these languages. So I'm really learning this from disability justice, from your book, how to be gentle with myself, how to be gentle with others, laughing in class, crying, feelings welcome. So
Yes.
thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, all of those things. I kind of, what popped in my head were all of the lessons, like you said, the neoliberal lessons that I learned directly and indirectly about what it meant to teach and be an instructor. And, disability justice has really given me the language / tools / community to kind of talk through some of these ideas and actually make it something that was accessible and doable.
And something also outside of the classroom is, I went to my graduate program was at a predominantly white university.
Mm.
And so I was looking for trans and queer of color led spaces. So me and my friends co-founded one. And I actually learned more and came home to my non-binary identity because of the awesome undergrads that I organized with. One of them shared, call me she when I'm wearing pants, call me
Mm.
he when I'm wearing a dress. And so we learned about our non-binary selves. We talked about our mental health, our disabilities, our autoimmune illness, and that crip-centric liberated zone, engaging in that poetry, that art, that music, films, and just the simplicity of storytelling, but also complexity, because there's a lot to it, of
Yeah.
just listening and showing up for each other. So yes, yay, Crip Kinship. It's happening inside and outside the classroom. I
Yeah.
have another question. Oh, unless you want to keep answering.
Just that I'm glad that you bring up student organizing and the spaces that our students create and that we created when we were students as these like really powerful learning spaces.
This next question is related. So I will ask us, I love the quote in your book where you share there's a power in naming our body mind experiences, just as there is power in witnessing body mind experiences. So the question is, how have stories brought us home? And what does home mean to us?
Thank you for these like generous, lovely, well-crafted questions. They're kind of offerings more than questions for us to like think through. So how do stories bring us home? So I was really called to this idea. I mean, one, a lot of Sins Invalid's disability justice work and their evenings of like multidisciplinary performance art, they are led by storytelling. But in a very personal way, I've had the experience of having other people, and I'm thinking of like large institutions, talking about my body mind experiences and my body mind needs. So like, I'm thinking of physicians, I'm thinking of therapists, I'm thinking of psychiatrists, I'm thinking of my family, right? Like And so when I started watching more of Sins Invalid's work, when I started interviewing amazing folks like Nomi Lamb, LAMM, and Leroy and Patty, and I started to learn, and this was through a guided response that Leroy shared. Leroy shared that storytelling is cultural activism. And so I started thinking a lot more about how there is power in naming our body mind stories outside of all the other stories that are told about us or assumed about us. And, you know, like, there is this amazing author I came across. Let me offer the spelling because I don't think this was in my like original name spelling sheet for access. So the author's name is Kayan, Kayhyhan, and their last name is Irani, Irani. And they wrote that storytelling becomes a way of remaking the world. And that kind of became this really powerful, bold lens for me, because I think we don't have anything more powerful than the magic we create in community and the stories that we tell about our body mind experiences, and the spaces that creates in community. And it does create change making, and storytelling in many ways creates for Sins Invalid. Like that's where crip-centric liberated zones came from. It came from two dear friends sitting at a cafe and talking about how we need a space for us. There is no space for us. Let's make one. And then that slowly grew into this amazing performance project. And so storytelling is activism. Storytelling is powerful rebellion.
So Shayda, it is you, Leah Lakshmi Piepsna Samarasinghe, Alice Wong, right? Mia Mingus, Mimi Cook, so many powerful queer femme folks of color, disabled, Crip, Patty Byrne, Aurora Levens Morales. The way you break down the constructed walls between our communities, right? That's a colonial concept to say race is separate from disability, is separate from gender, sexuality. No. And all of you brought us back home. And so just thank you so much. And, you know, I remember during my undergrad and coming home to my Filipinx self. And then it wasn't until graduate school that I was connecting disability justice issues with my Filipinx community. So content note, this is heavy about systemic colonial violence, but my great-grandfather was the only one to survive when Spanish priests murdered our entire clan in the Philippines for protesting sexual violence. So this is something heavy, right? It's on my great-grandfather's body mind. It is on my body mind when I'm having, you know, a panic attack, when I'm not feeling welcomed at a space, when someone puts my mom down for her intellect, when someone thinks my dad is not smart enough. Colonization came with ableism, and that we are viewed and treated not as people. And colonization also came with, as all of you are in conversation sharing, the degradation of our beautiful, brilliant, trans, queer, non-binary, gender fluid selves. Dr. Lenny Strobel writes about how colonizers literally fed women leaders, queer people, gender fluid Filipinx people to the crocodiles. But we are here. I am here. I'm surviving, right? Thriving. Me and my ancestors or my communities are not supposed to be here. So, and our body minds are holding these traumas. and we are looking for family, for community to heal with. We're coming back home to our trans, queer, crip of color selves. So y'all, Crip Kinship, get on it. So, you know, Filipinx, queer, crip, everything, like we're connected. And I, like Shayda, I just love your book, how you cite Alok and, you know, a non-binary, right, activists, and who shares that we're a constellation of stars and we all got to be shining brightly in the night sky. And Dr. Leanne Simpson, indigenous scholar activist, right, shares too that we're all these stars and we're connected. So your story and so many others are bringing us back home. So yes, love you, love y'all.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think you're reminding me of something else that happens with storytelling, and it's a reclamation of histories. Just one second. Solely spilled my coffee all over my desk. Could you bring me paper towels, please?
Oh my God.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I ask you a question about my
No.
cookies?
We are live.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, y'all. This is like real time emergency moment. We'll see.
No need to say sorry ever.
The tech is not important. So, okay. Yeah, just that I really think there is this opening that I experienced when I read Sins Invalid's Disability Justice Primer, and I can't access it right now, but if you type into your search engine, and maybe Paul, if you find this, if you type Sins Invalid Disability Justice Primer, it's the first, well, it's the second edition, but it's the first comprehensive text ever written about what is disability justice, what lineages does it rely on, you know, who are the folks that are a critical part of the movement, what are the principles of the movement, and then the most exciting part, I think for me as just like an educator, is like, now that you know what the movement is and now that you know the principles, how do you apply disability justice to your everyday practice, whether that's your own living, whether that's your activism, your art making, your teaching, etc. And so yeah, I just want to invite folks, like if you want to continue exploring disability justice, it's a really lovely, accessible, clear text. And Sins Invalid's second edition came from lots and lots of people giving feedback. So it's a community written text, communally written text.
So I put that in the chat, the Disability Justice Primer. Woohoo! So I have one last question for our conversation before Q&A. And it really is just bringing us back home to disability justice and Sins Invalid. So share the more amazingness about disability justice and Sins Invalid being central to you. What keeps bringing you back to disability justice and Sins Invalid?
Oh, access need. Can you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, no problem. So, why and how does Sins Invalid and disability justice central to you? And what brought you to Sins Invalid and disability justice? And what keeps bringing you back to Sins Invalid and disability justice?
So I came to, well, can I like take the timeline really back to like undergrad, like 2003. So this was after several hospitalizations for me, psychiatric hospitalizations, and I didn't really know anything about access needs. I didn't share with my faculty why I wasn't in class. My parents picked up my homework for me so that I wouldn't have to share that I was hospitalized. So, this cultural rhetoric, immigrant rhetoric of shame. And yeah, I never asked for access needs. If I couldn't do the assignment and I missed the deadline, I just missed it. And I met this amazing human who was very clear about his psychiatric disability and would share it very openly with classmates and just folks. And I remember that at first I said, I don't know if, is that something you want to share with people? I mean, this is like major internalized sanism, right? And he said, yeah, because it's just another way of being. So he was one of my major Crypt doulas before I even knew what disability, politicization, identity, pride, any of that was. And so, yeah, we created this group on campus for art making where non-disabled and disabled folks came together and told stories and made art. And that was my first understanding of, before I had the language, what crip-centric liberated zones were, why they were necessary, why it was that it fed everybody, like psychically, emotionally, somatically, like it fed us. And so we did it often. And then I started reading like lots of disability memoirs and like slowly like made my way to then learning about disability justice in grad school. And by that point, when I was hospitalized again, I shared with my committee, I can't take my exams because I'm probably going to be in the hospital because grad school made me sick. And just being very honest and transparent, and disability justice is something I come back to then, because it's given me the language to name myself without shame, name myself with pride. And it's giving me the language to really queer, decolonize the classroom, which if I couldn't do those things, then I wouldn't be able to survive in academia. I couldn't share my access needs with my students, So that's why I keep coming back to it, because I need it. We need it.
Likewise, I, like you too, I learned about disability justice and Sins Invalid during graduate school. But right, we have always known these tenets, these principles of wholeness, intersectionality, our interconnectedness. We need each other for tomorrow. And so honestly, the kids that I work with at the schools, K-5 kids, I co-founded a tutoring program in Eastern Washington. And many of the kids are disabled, are neurodivergent, are sick, English language learners, first gen, students of color. And right, every day in this K-12 education system that we live in today, they don't see themselves. They're taught to not love themselves. There's a bunch of states in the United States that even say things like, don't say gay. Like what? Are we not allowed, in the classroom?
And then too, like critical race theory and where you're allowed to, yeah, all of it.
So much of us, these kids that I work with, they're being forced to not be them, to not dream of a world where we are cared for, whether you can work or not, where a world where someone doesn't have to work 3 jobs to survive, to pay rent. So when I work with these kids, I'm reminded of disability justice and how the kids I work with, right, are moving all around and are fast, are slow, are talking fast, are talking slow, thinking fast or slow. And they remind me that I need to learn to embrace that about myself. And then likewise with college students, right? Embracing someone who's in the hospital, instead of punishing someone for being in the hospital, right? Asking, how can I support you? What community care do you need? How can we transform systems together that someone isn't being punished for who they are? So disability justice reminds me to love ourselves.
Beautiful, beautiful. Hi, Emmy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful conversation. I have a whole page of notes. And so now I'd love to transition over to the questions that our lovely attendees have posted for us. And I think we can just jump right into this first one. I'll read it aloud, and whoever wants to take it, feel free. So anonymous attendee says, I was wondering how we can bring disability and crip justice theory and practice to others who maybe aren't politicized or aware of their own disabilities. How can we connect to others and actively move to include them in our spaces?
Ooh, anonymous attendee. That's an excellent question. I understand this question. If I'm understanding this question correctly, I'm coming from thinking about how even in disability spaces on my campus, for example, anytime the word politicized or political comes up, people get uncomfortable. And so one of the things that I think is so important to do is to, once you take a look at the principles of disability justice, a lot of them are the things that we need collectively to thrive, and that can be woven into so many spaces that are incredibly a part of crip justice and disability justice and critical disability studies, but that invite this larger conversation. So whether it's conversations, which Paul, I think you brought this up, like whether it's conversations around what it means to move slowly. There are ways to talk about interdependence in a way that I think is really radical for all of our spaces. I think in our pandemic time, we're learning, if folks did not know this, we now know that independence is a myth. We are interdependent peoples, whether it's relying on one another for rides or food or printer paper or fill in the blank. And so some of those, just the ideas of slowness and moving in a sustainable way, making space for our elders in our movements, caretakers, people with children, all of that is disability justice related, having conversations about language justice. So I think those are all really powerful elements, very political elements that are accessible and can really create inclusive networks and exciting potential, I think.
All right, did you want to add anything, Paulina? Okay, great. So let's move on to the next one. Jody asks if you're familiar, here, I'll make the answer live, are familiar with Teki Lomnicki, don't know if I pronounced that correctly, who co-founded Tellin' Tales Theater in Chicago.
No, but luckily my laptop's elevated, so it still works. I'm putting it in my search browser right now, and I'm going to look them up. I almost want to create like a Google Doc, some place where we can share all of these like amazing resources and like crip disabled meaning makers, change makers. Thank you for sharing Teki with us.
All right, we have a question from Casper Gemar. Hi, so excited to listen to this amazing space tonight. I'm a queer crip educator, parentheses, almost PhD student. teaching middle schoolers and undergraduate students. This book has been a beautiful coming home for me. In my practice, I work to create learning spaces that feel like the possibility of home for myself and my students who are often pushed out of classrooms. My question is twofold. What have been some of your most joyous moments in teaching and how did they come to be? And two, how have you found community with other Crip educators / scholars?
I can go ahead if you'd like. So my joyful moments are when I find out students love Steven Universe like me, an animated show. They love Avatar, Korra. They love anime like me. They love queer of color show Pose. They love getting curious with JVM. Just we're all vibing that we can relate. They love Pokemon, Hello Kitty, like me. Special interests unite. So that's my joyful moments is wow, we connect so much. They love puppies, kittens, coffee, tea. Like we have so much in common. And it involves the fluffiness of life. As Leah Lakshmi Piepsna shares, right? Bed worlds are cozy blankets. And I love how Shayda loves poutine and rainbow sprinkles and rainbows like me. So this happens with students all the time, K-12, higher ed. We love our plants. We love rest. We love joy. We love our pajamas. So yay. Congrats to future doctor.
Yes, congratulations, future Dr. Casper. Yeah, I mean, yeah, vibing on coziness. I am coming to you all in my sweats right now. You know, and I guess like a joy for me is when my students, either like when we're collectively in the room or like individually, tell me I need fill in the blank. I need an extension. I need more time. I need to see my therapist. I can't come to class today. I need you to send an email out to everybody and ask them to wear low scent things to class because I feel nauseous and I feel like throwing up in class. You know, like when my students say I need, I feel such stimmy glitter joy. I just, it makes me very happy. It makes me very, very happy. And it feels like a huge transformative change to like all of the regressive bullshit that happens in academia that prevents us or distances us from that like expression of need, body mind expression of need, I should say. And how have we found community with other Crip educator scholars? So disability groups on campus have been really helpful, but for me, I've met so many amazing folks that I've never met in person, like Paul, like we've never met in person, but like other folks too, like just social media. Instagram is where I've met a lot of amazing femme folks, femme scholars, Crip disabled scholars. And that's really where I meet so many folks that I've never met in person, but we share resources. The Critical Disability Studies group on Facebook is fabulous. I will put that in the chat. I've met lots of folks there.
All right. We are running out of time. We want to be respectful of everybody's space and time and needs to get up and move or get away and lay down. So I think this may be our last question. It is from Jenny Spearling. One of my colleagues is really thinking about queer world making for their dissertation, and I'm so excited to share all this amazing wisdom with them and crip-centric liberated zones. Do you see connections between queer world making and what you both are speaking about?
Okay, let me just say very quickly, I think a big part of disability justice is dreaming. And like, I'm talking about like the active dreaming that like amazing people like T.L. Lewis write about, the dreaming that like Tricia Hersey from Nap Ministry talks about, So yeah, it's all about future making, future dreaming, and realizing that yes, queer, disabled folks of color deserve futures.
Yes, and queer and Crip are closely connected, right? Many of our communities have been pathologized and have been looked down upon. And so we're both like in your face, like, no, we exist, we love, we thrive, we're dreaming of, as Shayda said, new worlds where we're cozy, where we rest, where we share coffee and tea and boba together, where we can love ourselves in the way we want, we can love each other in the ways we want, sexually or asexually or gray asexually. So yes, hand in hand, or connected, body parts connected.
These were such lovely, lovely questions. Thank you all so much for occupying space with us. Y'all are amazing. And I don't know who's comfortable. If you are comfortable, we're going to take a selfie. I house these on Instagram. I'll put my handle here. I don't know if you're comfortable sharing yours, Paul, with the group. But yeah, if y'all are comfortable, it's selfie time. Okay, here we go. One, let me know when you're ready, Paul. 1, 2, 3. Thank you all so very much.
Maraming salamat. Many thanks.
All right, I want to thank all of you for sharing this wonderful space. It was so lovely. A reminder, you can always please pick up a book of Crip Kinship. I absolutely adored it. Countrybookshelf.com. Yeah, and definitely look into the resources that both our wonderful panelists have popped in this chat, and keep this beautiful space going.
Thank you so much, Emmy. Thank you, Country Bookshelf.